Hey everybody, how are you? Welcome to some fly tying fundamentals. And I thought what I would do is, rather than just tie patterns, which I see all over the internet, and there's some really amazing videos, I thought maybe I would try to break it down according to individual skills, in case anybody was either a beginner or had difficulty with one particular aspect of tying, and maybe I could help them. So the first thing I want to go over is how to tie synthetics in as tailing materials. This video is going to be all about tailing and nothing else. So there are some different synthetics we're going to tie with right now. First will be some rubber legs. Second will be some Zelon. Third will be some antron. And fourth will be some crystal flash. And hopefully between all of these different materials you'll get a good idea of how to tail just about anything. So as far as putting some rubber legs on, and please forgive me, but I'm not going to go too nuts about the number of them and everything else. The idea is just to show you the skills. So what I'm doing here is taking two sets of rubber legs, and synthetics are a lot different than natural materials and easier to tail with because they compress pretty easily compared to natural materials. So all I'm going to do is loop it around the thread as such, tie it down on top, and there really is only a couple of things you need to be worried about when it comes to tailing with something like rubber legs or most synthetics as a whole. I'm going to hold them straight out the back. That's very important. You don't want to hold the materials off to either side like this. You want to hold them straight out the back. And then the other thing is that you want, let me lock my vise down here, you just want to make sure that you control torque. And this is really the key to all of fly tying, or most of fly tying. You see, what a lot of people will do is they'll put equal pressure all the way around on the thread. And once a material is locked in like these rubber legs, you'll notice I'm going forward with my thread. This is in front of the tie-in point. It has no effect whatsoever on the tail. I have this here, everything is fine. Now the problem is, if I continue to use this even circular force all the way around the shank, and now if you notice, look at me here, I've been above the tie-in point, now I'm going to go below. If I do that and I wrap over, I start pulling the fibers with me. Can you see that? I pull the fibers with me. I'll group them together so you can get a better view of it. I pull, you see how the thread grabs them? And because of the centripetal force, it pulls them over to the side. So what you want to make sure of when you're tailing right now is that you hold the material straight out the back, and then as you come over the top, no pressure. Notice if I put pressure, look what happens to the thread. You get like a tourniquet or a constriction point there. I'm going to go no pressure, then pull straight down. No pressure, pull straight down. No pressure, pull straight down. No pressure, pull straight down. And to keep the material going straight out and not going down the hook shank like this, what I like to look to do on most hooks, every hook has a reference point, but on most hooks it's straight above the barb, and your material will go straight out the back. So that's it with rubber legs. And then you can, you know, that actually caught them a little bit, but you can work your way forward and so on and so forth. So that is the tying in of rubber legs, and I'll give you a chance on the next couple of materials to re-emphasize, re-emphasize is kind of redundant, emphasize the same exact points. Namely, this time with Zelon. Now with this particular Zelon material, and I do most of my synthetic tailing is with Zelon. We like to trim it before we put it on the shank. Don't cut it afterwards. When I first started tying, we would tie it in like this, blah blah blah, and then we'd get in here and start tying it off. You really don't want to do that. You want to trim it first. Now the next thing that we can also do is a couple of different ways to tie this in. You could put it at exactly the beginning point that you want, or, and this is a little close up to the eye, you can relax the pressure on the thread and just gently pull the Zelon to the back until you get it in the place that you want. And you'll notice again, my right hand is not sitting idly by. I'm resting it on the vise and I'm pulling my fibers straight out the back right above the hook point I stop, and then I come down again. I do not put max pressure on this last wrap. Not only could the torque possibly pull it over the top, but if it were natural materials, it would often flare them, and I don't think I want them flared. So I come forward one turn, and then I start putting pressure all the way up. And look at how it just lays right there. Okay? So that's tying in Z-Line. And then, of course, I would just trim it to the point that I want for the proper length. So just like putting in Z-Line is putting in antron. The only thing about antron is that I tend to use it as a shuck mostly on the LaFontaine caddis, and I really want it to be sparse and airy, so to speak. So I'm going to tie it in. Notice I pre-cut it. I tie it to the point where once it's smashed down, I have it the length of the body I want to support. And again, I am holding it not quite as tight here, over to the hook point and forward. And there would be my shuck trimmed to the point where I want to trim. And if you've never done much fly tying and you really want to learn how to put in tails, I suggest you start with synthetics because they're easier than our regular natural materials. Okay? So the next thing that I'm going to do is just make a tail out of a little bit of crystal flash. And that's just slightly different than making a tail out of Z-Line or antron. And you could do the Z-Line or antron this way, but typically Z-Line and antron are tied on trout flies, which are often pretty small in size. And what you don't want to do is tie those particular material, little tiny trout flies, and create any lumps or bumps on the shank. Therefore, we cut them flush. But if I'm tying something like crystal flash in, typically these would be tails on hairwing salmon flies or a saltwater pattern, and we're not quite as fine because we're not dealing with a size 16 or 18 hook. So the big difference is, and I just did it without showing you, I loop the crystal flash over the shank, and that's great because it locks it in. Again, as always, with my right hand, I hold it directly along the shank. And look, no torque to pull it over. See how this torque is pulling it over if I put all pressure? So I don't want that. What I want is pull straight down, pull straight down. Now, I could cheat it a little bit once you get a little more experience. Hold it tight with my hands, and then over here really concentrate on putting the torque straight down because I'm at the end of it. One slightly less tight turn, and then start my way forward again. And then typically I trim, and there would be my tail of crystal flash. So those are 4 very common synthetic materials that you would use for tailing and how you tie them in. Now, the final material that I want to show you about for tailing is micofibbetts. And micofibbetts, in terms of dry flies, are an extremely common fly tying material. What we're doing here is working with micofibbetts, and micofibbetts are basically mayfly tails that you would put on your dry flies. And a lot of people, when they tie micofibbetts, they tie a ball of dubbing here at the right above the barb at the bend of the hook. Then they lay 2 fibreds on one side, 2 fibbets in on the other side, or fibbets, whatever you want to call them. And then they wrap them down, and they have all sorts of trouble with the angles, and this is also a very time-consuming process. A while ago, I came up with this trick, and it's funny because I talk to a lot of professional fly tyers. I have a lot of friends who are professional tyers. I used to be back in the day. And what I learned is they all came up with the same exact trick, which is basically take a loop of thread, and as I work this thread back to right above the barb, then I like to take 1 turn forward, maybe 2, so that I get it a little away from the direct pressure of the thread. And then I take some micofibbetts. I don't want too many. Ordinarily I would care that I came up with exactly 4, depending on the size of the hook. If it's a smaller hook, I'd use less. And then I lay these micofibbetts right over the shank using my materials hand to lay them directly in. And then, this is important, I make a loop, a loose loop. I lay this and I pull straight down. Again, torque. I don't want any spin that pulls it to one side of the shank. I want straight down. And if you can see, my microfibbetts pretty much, the head of them is off at an angle, but the tail part is pretty much coming straight off. Now what I'm going to do is split them, pulling them apart with my fingers, okay, and then I'm going to pull the thread loop right up between them. So this is a bit of a struggle for me right now because I do not do this at the angle that I'm doing it at right now, but normally I do it straight up at the top, and if I do it straight over the top, I just pinch and grab two, pull up, done. But I'm trying to do it in a way that you can see what to do here. And I'm going to grab a couple of fibers and pull this straight in between them. You see how I did that? And I come over the top and I lock that dubbing thread in, or that, I keep saying dubbing loop because I'm not used to saying just loop of thread, but I lock that loop of thread in, and then I work my way back, being careful not to go all the way to the end of my tie-in point because I want to leave a little bit of a lack of pressure there. And here are my microfibbetts split in the back of the tail. And that's really all there is to it. So the quick and easy way that most people who work a lot with microfibbetts do is thread loop out the back, lay them on the top, split, pull it straight up the back, and you got yourself excellent microfibbetts.